well. Now, US universities are rapidly shifting from defiance to compliance with the Trump administration as they fear for their funding. Many institutions now hiring lobbyists and engaging with lawmakers to navigate the pressures from Washington following threats from Donald Trump to revoke federal support. Schools such as Columbia have begun to meet his demands to retain vital funding as lawmakers now prepare to hold hearings on controversial topics like anti-Semitism. University leaders now scrambling to defend their campuses and secure financial aid. Oz Sultan's joining us to discuss all this. And Oz, when we have a look at what's been happening on university campuses, historically, they've been rather progressive, left-leaning, some would say radicalised as well, and the Trump administration, as part of its agenda, really starting there, trying to end all that.
Well, you know, DEI was one of the first things that took a cut, and that was very big under the Obama administration and the Biden administration. But you didn't see jobs resulting from kids taking out $90,000 a year loans for degrees that were in, you know, not civics, not political science, not technology, but really more conceptual frameworks of degrees that didn't have, you know, direct correlation to jobs. And then secondarily, on top of this, you know, we're seeing the challenge of anti-Semitism vis-a-vis the question of, you know, legal and due protest. I think where we're sitting right now is, you know, the government has seen a lot of anti-American sentiment inside of the protests. There's an intent to nip this in the bud. There's a big looming question of the rights of Palestinians inside of this, but that seems to be something that gets buried under conversations that happen about Hamas on campuses on a consistent basis. So, you know, pulling back on funding where we're having anti-American sentiment, I think, is the first piece of this. But now universities kind of trying to figure out how they play inside of this landscape is where we have lobbyists coming in, and we're going to have a whole bunch of consultants that are going to position themselves to try and help these organizations navigate what is now an increasingly complicated landscape in Washington.
I think it goes back, some say, to the Vietnam War protests and that era, the Nixon era, where essentially students stood up against the Republican administration. What are your views on that? How did we get to this stage, as you say, where a lot of students are going to university or to college to learn things that don't lead to a job?
Well, I think part of it really kind of stemmed from the Obama administration saying that they would take a lot of conceptual topics and turn them into potential government jobs. And you had a lot of this growth, you know, intersectionality, understanding, conceptual understanding of race and rhetoric, things that don't necessarily bring Americans closer together or actually solve problems, but are things that are more attuned to really be living in academia than living inside of the governmental bureaucracy. And I think that's really where the challenge is, because you had two, you know, cycles of Obama and one cycle of Biden, effectively roughly about 16 years, where we were telling Americans from the presidency down that there'll be jobs for you for these types of things. And the net is there aren't, right? And now I think the DEI move really is looking future forward at the fact that AI is going to cut 30% of what we have in jobs now. We really need to trim the fat, but at the same point in time, there needs to be some guidelines with universities in terms of how we, you know, allow anti-American sentiment from non-Americans. If you're American, say whatever you want, but if you're here on our courtesies, you know, maybe pick your battles.
Yeah, all right.